Hello. Thank you so much for coming today to listen to me talk about this project. It was one of those projects that I think shared across everyone that worked on it. It's just one of those once-in-a-lifetime projects, both in terms of the design, but also who we were designing it for. I'll just say that the opening of this project was an emotional and just a really special day for me. But thank you to the American Concrete Institute, ACI, and the Concrete Convention for inviting me and hosting. It's been a long time since I've been able to speak in public, so it's really nice to have people in the same room. Cheers to that for sure. So first I just wanted to open with a little story that I think kind of captures several of my trips to this project. But one day I was walking the job site. I think the building was more or less in this state, and one of the workers came up to me and he said, "Are you the architect?" And I said, "Well, I'm one of them. I think he's probably one of the Baker guys, concrete worker, but it could have been anybody trying to deal with some of the curves that everyone from the window guys, the sheetrock, and especially the concrete were dealing with." But he's like, "I have a question about the design." I said, "Sure. What the hell were you guys smoking?" and I'm sure he was probably being nice to me at the moment, but I just got to hand it to the folks that took this project on. What they were able to achieve was inspiring and incredible for us. So as the architect, we draw a lot of stuff, but we depend on the guys building these projects to make the ideas a reality. So today I'm just going to start with a little bit about Allied Works and how we approach projects in general. Then I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about the history of the project and the project team. Then I'm going to go through project goals and aspirations, like this would be the things that inspired the design that we use to inform the design process. And then we'll go into the design process. I'm just going to show how the project transformed from concept design through construction, really. And then hit on a few of the design challenges and some of the solutions we came up with. And then finish with questions. So Allied Works as a firm, we're based started in Portland, Oregon. We also have a New York office. There it is. We have a pretty large variety of work that we do. Everything from residential to large commercial buildings all across the country. So we have art museums, houses. This project here is one of the first projects that we did for an advertising firm in Portland called Wieden+Kennedy. They do a lot of the Nike ads. We love art museums, and I've done quite a few of those. This is the Clifford Still Museum in Denver. This is the National Music Center in Calgary. Small winery projects in Oregon. This is the Museum of Arts and Design at Columbus Circle in New York City. Seattle Art Museum. So as you can see, we don't really commit to a particular style. I would just say we're contemporary, and we respond to the site and program elements that are presented to us. So the first thing we do is dive into a deeper understanding of the landscape that we're building in. Sometimes these are natural landscapes, but one of the lessons that we've learned is that human intervention in a landscape can really have a great impact on the landscape, for one. Advocating for clear cuts here, but you can see that when you do things to the landscape, that juxtaposition, it can reveal something about the landscape that you're building in. Or in this case, this is the Palouse outside of the Columbia Gorge in eastern Washington. And you can see how the road cutting through it can amplify the form of that landscape. We also look for man-made, human-made patterns in the landscape. So this example is an orchard. And then also the natural patterns that you see out there. All this inspires our work. We also look carefully and investigate the human engagement that most of our landscapes have had for centuries. You can see here a couple bridges, but really thinking about the kinds of material and construction systems that have been going on in certain regions for centuries, and also, as you can see here, the limitations of some of those materials. Here's a shot of the National Music Center in Calgary and how that project got in some inspiration from the surrounding landscapes of Alberta, Canada. So also our sites can be a wide range of different sites. So whether it's wetlands or a prairie, industrial area in St. Louis, college campus, all of these are sites that we've worked on, but also this is the Wieden+Kennedy headquarters during construction, where the site was really an existing building, and what kind of intervention that we would do inside the building to make that space. One of our earliest projects, I'll just mention we do love concrete, so this is a great place for me to be, way better than the steel convention, I'm sure. But this project was the Sightings Project, and the program was really to just design an overlook at a art museum that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere in the Columbia Gorge. And so, knowing this landscape well, we went out and decided we wanted to use this opportunity to create a place where people, really the experience of viewing this landscape would be transformed by the thing that we built. And so as you move through this, there are different spaces that you can occupy, different views are framed. So it was sort of a study in how a really simple program could really celebrate both the material and the landscape that it's in. We also look to just artwork for inspiration. There are these amazing artists out there that are experimenting with materials and different forms, and we can learn a lot about how different shapes and materials affect light, and how light itself could be used to sculpt space. And at a different scale, different materials can have very different effects on the experience. Both of these are metal, but as you can see, very different ways that material is used. I don't know what that was. We also focus a lot on projects that have cultural significance, and we really take that opportunity to design spaces that are both flexible and that kind of transcend, I guess, the program that we're going to be designed for. And this is the lobby or the gathering space in that Wieden+Kennedy headquarters. That space is used all the time for concerts. It's a concert venue. This is the lobby at the St. Louis Museum, where the community has taken it over and can use it in all different ways. This is a corporate headquarters in Japan for fast retailing. And then even a dining hall in New York City for 11 Madison Park. But, these spaces become these mixing spaces for people. And it's kind of where the magic happens in a lot of these projects. this is a lobby for Pacific Northwest College of Art, again, using it as a concert venue. And then this is a project we did with Turner, who also did this National Veterans Museum. This is the Timber Stadium. I believe Orlando just played here on Sunday. It was a draw. Is it any Orlando fans? No? I don't know. Anyway, this was an existing historic stadium, and we were tasked with adding seats, so we stacked 3 new levels of seating vertically. We had no space to extend out onto the street. It's a fairly urban site, but you know this is an example of how the architecture embraces the historic and actually creates space on the exterior for the city. So I'm just going to go through quickly here a few more things that inspire us. We are really interested in the acts of making throughout the entire process of building, and that starts with just drawings. We really find beauty and inspiration in the drawings themselves. Here's an example of Ando. Tadao Ando is one of the concrete design masters. He's an architect. This is a concept sketch that he did, and the technical drawings, both beautiful and inspiring. And so we use both drawings and models a lot in our design exploration. We find that it really opens up the creative juices and allows us to really explore these various qualities and gain insights that we wouldn't normally do with just the standard computer design drawings. So this was an art museum out in a rural setting where we used colored pencils and different found objects to create that representation of the landscape. This is a model we did for the Clifford Still Museum. This is the National Music Center model in Calgary that we really referred back to often as the concept for that building. This was somebody found an old trumpet, cut it up, and we cast these pieces out of plaster and trumpet parts. In this model, we wanted to really create a contrast between the building and the landscape, so we charred the wood base to bump up that contrast, and that helped inform the design in a way, especially in the choice of materials that we used for that project. And then you'll see this a little later when I talk about the models that we did for the museum project. So like I said, we're inspired by all made things, really, whether it's constructed by humans or natural. These are some tile studies for the National Music Center in Calgary, just looking at different textures and colors. The choices about material are really important. And then here's just an example of 3 different drawings, I guess, or phases of design, starting with a rendering, a BIM model, and the construction, and how just showing how the ideas transfer directly from early on through construction. So here we are, National Veterans Museum. The city of Columbus embarked on a decade-long effort to revitalize its riverfront. And in 2010, we were invited to participate in a competition, and we were given the project. This was a project that had long been supported by one of Ohio's most famous veterans and soldier and astronaut, Senator John Glenn. Unfortunately, he passed away before the really just before the project opened, so I wasn't able to see it to fruition, but it didn't hurt having the support of Senator Glenn for sure. And then in 2018, the museum opened and was designated a National Veterans Museum. It's about 53,000 square feet. The diameter is about 300 feet, about the size of a football field. There are 30,000 square feet of exhibits, 2 permanent and 1 temporary. There's about 5,000 feet of expansion space in here as well. I just wanted to acknowledge the team. These projects don't happen without a big team, for one, and in this case, it was just a wonderful team to work with. Client was the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation. We were the architect, of course. Ralph Applebaum was an exhibit designer. We had a design group as an associate local architect. Olin, landscape architect. Civil engineer was EMH&T. Knippers Helbig, structural. Prater for MEP. And Arup for lighting and security. Morrison Hirschfield was the envelope consultant. Jaffe Holden, acoustics. We had a concrete consultant, Reg Hoff and Associates. I don't know if any of y'all have worked with him, but Reg Hoff is, I think he's retired now, but he's been instrumental in a lot of our concrete projects. And then construction manager with Turner Construction. Nigel Carter is sitting right here. The fact that we're still talking is, I think, a testament to the success of this project. So, I'll say more about Nigel a little later. And then the concrete contractor, of course, Baker Construction, who is here today. Who I just can't say enough about the achievement of the guys working on the concrete here. I don't think anything quite like this has been done. Maybe there's some bridges that have been constructed that have these, similar challenges in terms of where you're forming concrete and the spans. But this wasn't a bridge. It was a building with way higher tolerances, and an architect that kept hounding them about quality of the finish, and they just did an outstanding job. So I'm going to go through a little bit of our design process. Like that story I told you from the beginning, if I had an hour to talk about the design to the guy who asked me what I was smoking, is basically what I would have told him. Although I am from Portland, Oregon, so I don't remember what I was smoking actually. So as I mentioned, we start with exploration of the site history, looking at the setting. A lot can be revealed by looking at the history, both in terms of the design context, but also, what are the soil conditions under the building? How often does it flood? Things like that. But I think from a cultural standpoint, understanding the story of a place is very important. We take that very seriously. And then, of course, also what's going to happen in the future. Can everyone still hear me with that? All right, I'm just going to talk through it. What are the future plans for a site? So here is our site here. This site is right across the street from the Science and Industry Museum. And then all this white are future plans for development. And all along the river, as I mentioned, they've really done a lot of work to draw people back into this part of the city. So understanding what those future plans are and the kind of impact that this project can have on those plans was a big deal. Just another context with the location of the site here. And then zooming in, we always come up with, this is one iteration of a site forces diagram, but just understanding what the flows of people and different forces that act on the building. There are also diagrams that show the impacts of wind and sun. All these things are factored in before we really start designing. One line of force I did want to point out was this. There's an annual parade that marches down Broad Street and enters into the site here. That was obviously one of the big major axes is this Broad Street axis. So we knew that responding to that flow of traffic, both pedestrian and car traffic, was going to be an important part of the design. So here is a shot of the building that was there before. This is the existing Franklin County Veterans Museum Memorial. So it was already a special place for veterans in Ohio. So, when you take away something that people care deeply about, you want to include them and be respectful of what their fears are about losing this special thing. So we spent a lot of time working with veterans, presenting our ideas, and letting them know that we were going to be replacing it with a much better building than they had. This building was also the site of the 1970 World Professional Bodybuilding Contest, where Arnold Schwarzenegger won. And I think that there were some people who that was way more important, and the reason why they wanted to save the building. There was a statue of Arnold outside. They relocated it somewhere. So the next step after that analysis is establishing and understanding what the goals are for the project. This is just an example of some of the statements that we heard while having conversations with veterans and the client. And, oftentimes we'll take these words and put them on the wall just like we would important design drawings, just to, if it's something that's important, remind us of why we're doing these projects and who are we actually building for. So we boiled the primary goals down to these three. Memorial needs to be a symbol of veteran service, even when not open. Educational and inspirational exhibits need to communicate veteran service and sacrifice. Exhibits need to be interactive and technology-driven to engage the public, especially school-age children. And then these 4 words: honor, connect, inspire, educate, or I don't know what you call them, but they were just the aspirational, I guess, the 4 things that the museum wanted to give to visitors when they came. So that's that first question of what type of building is appropriate for a memorial. So we looked, around for examples in the armed forces world and found this. This is the National Museum of the Marine Corps, and I don't know if this was on purpose or not, but there was a striking resemblance to the Iwo Jima statue in Annapolis. If it wasn't intentional, it's very coincidental. But this is a really good example. You can maybe you don't like the building, but of what we're looking for in this search of what it means to be a symbol. But a symbol is also a beacon and a marker on the landscape. So, number one, this museum was different than other. I think the first museum that really, instead of focusing on a specific conflict or war, it didn't focus on a specific branch of the military. This was a museum for all veterans, and a place really that veterans could share their stories, personal accounts of their experience. It was to be a vessel of memory. A lot of these artifacts have very specific personal significance to individuals in the not-so-distant past. These are Ohio battle flags from the Civil War. Also a remembrance of past conflicts, from Civil War to World War II and Vietnam War, and then a reminder of those who still serve today. And then the place wanted to be a place created by and for veterans. And I'm not so much speaking just of the building itself, but the exhibits. There's a space in the very center of the building that's curated by service men and women who are interested in telling a story in an exhibit. Maybe they're doing some artwork. There are different places in the building where artists are actual veterans, and they can display their work there. And I mentioned the parade before, but every year in Columbus there's an annual processional where I think they organize chronologically based on the conflict. So if there's still a Civil War, soldiers still alive, they would start, and it's followed. And there's this whole journey to the what used to be the same site. It was the Franklin Museum before, but we knew that this building was going to be the terminus of that event. So how to design that into the project was important, and I would say had probably the biggest impact on the form that you see today. So anyway, this idea of the processional, I just wanted to go through some of the inspiration. We searched for examples of the processional and the kinds of things that we wanted the building to maybe aspire to. But one of them was that along the path, the ceremonial path, there were times where you could look back and see the participants of the parade that were coming behind you. That was important. And also that the path ascended and came to a place where you could reflect and also connect back to the landscape that you were in. So anyway, this is one processional concept. Or even at night, you can sort of see where you're going to be. Other processional concept where, is the procession an act of discovery or an act of ascension or an act of connection or enlightenment, which the spiral often represents. But some of these are just practical. Ascension requires a ramp or steps. And there's some practical advantage to the spiral form as well, especially when you get inside the museum and how people flow through the exhibits. And then other local examples from where we work in the Northwest. This is a memorial as well. And it's a spiraling path that leads you to a sanctuary space in the middle. And then just what does a landscape for gathering and reflection look like? This is another local example from Portland. Everybody still hear me? Okay. So then the sanctuary is what we call where this path terminates. So when people are in this parade, there's a ceremonial ending to that parade, and it's also where people, if they're visiting the building, might complete their journey through the exhibits. So it's a place where visitors gather and reflect on what they've just seen, and also connect back to the city. So these are just some images that inspired the thinking around what the design of that space was going to look like. So the exhibit space itself, there's also a processional nature to viewing exhibits, whether it's artwork, but especially in working with the exhibit designer, we knew that the chronology or the path that people are taking to view, a lot of the exhibits were actually are telling stories, and so there's a somewhat linear, inherent linear path that we wanted to guide with the design of the building. So these are just some ideas, again, words that we had on the wall for a while to remind us of what this exhibit space would be. And then just some images of what from other similar museums, what these artifacts look like, and the nature of how they might be displayed. So a lot of the artifacts that we had were personal effects, personal letters. It might be a lighter. There were some weapons, because obviously a soldier's weapon is very personal and important to them. But there were also just a whole chests of personal belongings that became remembrances for a lot of families, and in just priceless keepsakes that have been donated to the exhibit. And so that the exhibit not only was showing the artifact, but there was always a story behind the artifact. So there might be an artifact associated with a photograph or letters from that person, and so people could really understand how artifacts connected to people, which is really, I think, unusual for museums like this. Also, the museum, some of the exhibits were about lessons of service and sacrifice and remembrances. At the top, there's the lobby that enters onto the sanctuary. There's a folded flag with instructions on how to fold the flag properly, which is really a pretty moving exhibit. And it's very simple, just a flag surrounded by mirrors. So I'm just going to read this one. The last sort of words. It sums up what the museum itself as a whole was needed to do. So the Memorial and Museum gathers the community together and reaches out to the life and energy of the city. The NVMM project is about commemorating and sharing stories of veteran service and sacrifice. So here are just a couple more symbols of service that inspired the design in some way. So once all that information is collected and distilled, we start the design process, and that can take a while. And we really try to reserve ourselves, even though I think individually we can't help ourselves and we go sketch things. But we really do hold back until we've digested all that information and start sketching. My boss, Brad Clopeville, he is time and time again, over and over again, just comes up with these incredible concepts. Sometimes his drawings are a little hard to interpret, but they often do become the idea right out of the gate for the building. So, having seen the building, you can see already the idea of the spiral. So this sketch on the left is really just a plan sketch, I guess, but we might start doing section studies that show different ways that the building can interact with the surrounding landscape. I think this represents the levee wall in the river. And then, just a sketch like this, it takes that plan idea and flips it into a three-dimensional idea. This is just a red ribbon with a flag in the center. And then these sketches sort of develop more and more, start to include different parts of the site, start to speak to possible orientations In this sketch, this would be that main Broad Street axis. And you can see the direction of the spiral here is starting to pick up that flow of the parade. And then we always go to models as soon as we start to develop a rough idea of what the three-dimensional form might take. We experiment with different models. And we use these both as ways to progress the design, but also as ways to communicate with the client. So this is a wood model that we actually built to convey. We usually start with a lot of paper models, just cutting them up in different ways. We might use clay to carve. But here already you can start to see how the idea of this spiral and a path for that processional coming off the landscape and up into the sanctuary space, and then underneath that would be, you start to see where the exhibits themselves would be housed. We also do diagrams like this that start to think about the program and the different relationships between the spaces. So it's not necessarily meant to be a floor plan literally, but it does show adjacencies that are really important to preserve through the design. So these are some of the earliest plans, more developed plans. This was a competition, so in a competition you have to come up with a big idea quickly and then have some solution for a floor plan. So these are really a first stab. They look more resolved than they probably are, but at organizing that program into this idea of the spiral. And even here early on, you can see how the exhibits, there are already ideas on how the exhibit was going to lay out, even at this early concept phase. And then from above, here's Broad Street. We ended up flipping the entry location of the ramp. So the processional would come down Broad Street from downtown, up off the landscape onto the roof of the sanctuary, and so this is that outdoor space maybe you've seen in photos. And then also associated with this project is a memorial grove. It's surrounded by a water feature. Didn't have enough time to really get into the design of that, but Nigel, I'm sure, has some stories about it. And then you can see here the Scioto River to the northeast. And so this is a 3D model rendering of the site. And this is our concept image for that competition. You can just see it. In general, the idea of this beacon of light, marker on the landscape. So while this design is much different than where we ended up, for one, you don't see any concrete here, but it really did kind of capture all of the goals that we were after. Captured the spirit of it. But projects move on from concept design, and a lot of things change during that exploration. So these are some early concept models. So we start with, these are made of, I think, paper mache, and it really loosely trying to come up with different forms that they capture the idea, but this is really starting to look at different material options. And because concrete really wasn't, our material choice of concrete wasn't there yet. I think it was an option that we were considering. But the material choice really needs to be selected carefully, and it's really based on the question of whether it serves that architectural idea. We also take another look at the site. This is that same site forces diagram, and how are those forces resolved in the architecture itself. These are some early circulation diagrams that start to show how the flow of people move through the building into the center. By this time, a general structural idea was starting to take shape. You can see there's 3 distinct rings. And in order to meet the program requirements, the rings began to squish and stretch just to get, the square foot requirements for certain parts of the building were different in different areas. So or as the project developed, the shape and form of the building changed as well. Here's some more diagrams just to show you that sort of evolution. And then this is just one example of a sketch that was passed back and forth between our exhibit designer and our office, showing the path and flow of visitors through the exhibits. And constantly testing that against whether our design was serving that idea. Then we move to the computer and really start to look at, in more detail, the structure. And, at this point, I think we were still considering steel and concrete. So it really could have been any material, but as the design develops, it starts to reveal more about what that material should be. And I will mention too that Turner was with us all the way through this phase of design, and their expertise and insight was instrumental in the decisions that we were making along the way. So particularly when we got into the question of what material to use for the structure, that relationship and having them on the design team throughout the design process was really critical for this project, but we always advocate for that. Not because we like contractors, but because it really does make a difference. So this is one of those study models I showed you earlier that we kind of pulled aside and thought was starting to hit the mark. It might not mean much to you. We think it's beautiful, but there's a lot of information in here. That, one of them is just the material quality of the model itself was attractive. It kind of hit a tone for us and the client about a sense of materiality and honesty and texture that we knew needed to be conveyed in the not only the material choice but how it was expressed on the exterior of the building. So we all know it was concrete. It ended up being concrete. So we love concrete as an office. We just think it's a wonderful material, both in terms of its longevity. This is the Pantheon Room. Knowing concrete, you probably know that this was built about 2,000 years ago and is still the largest unreinforced concrete span. So it's durable. But as a student, visited this building. It's also just an incredible space, and the fact that it's concrete even adds to the quality of it. We also, look to civil projects as well. This is a bridge designed by Robert Maillard in Switzerland. He did a bunch of bridges spanning these canyons in Switzerland, but they're just beautiful. He was an engineer, but definitely had a sense of design, and you can see his attention to how just the way the arches taper, the proportions, and it works, withstands the test of time. Concrete is just an amazing material when it comes to its malleability, the forms that it can take, durability, and honesty of structural expression. So I'm just going to show a few examples of architects that have inspired us And you can't help but think about the people that were building these things as well. This was TWA terminal at JFK. It still actually exists. They just converted it to a hotel, but this was designed by Eero Saarinen and built in 1962. So this has been, forms like this have been going on for a long time. And this is just another picture of this, showing what you can do with concrete and how it inspires us to use it to convey that honesty and of structural expression, but also you can shape space with it. A little bit like some of the artwork that we looked at earlier. This is another cast-in-place concrete. This project is in Brazil, built in 1972. Oscar Niemeyer is the designer. Pierre Nervi has done these amazing long-span structures. And then Tadao Ando, who we always look to for inspiration as designers, but he was not afraid to use as-cast concrete as just a beautiful finish. And then today there's some amazing stuff going on with still using concrete as a structural, almost like a diagrade shell. This is in Dubai. With advances in thermal performance requirements, these kind of structures that have an exterior structural expression on the exterior, there are some challenges that I'll talk about. Thermal bridging being one that you have to work through, for sure. This is another contemporary project by Studio Ann. Just a really simple precast system, casting concrete on sand and lifting it up and it being the facade of the building. And then we have our own experience in working with this material as well. So this is the St. Louis Contemporary Arts Museum. This is that Wieden+Kennedy headquarter building where we took an old Portland warehouse, took the center out of it, dropped in a concrete shear wall structure into the center, and that shear wall has its own post and beam system that support bridges and stairs that go through that space. A very successful project. It's still in operation, still beloved in the neighborhood that this is in, and fun to go visit. Every once in a while we get to go see a boxing match or a concert here. And here's a house at Sun Valley. You can see the concept sketch here and the house, and how the material quality of concrete really just captures the spirit of even these earliest drawings. This is the Clifford Steel Museum in Denver. Just a small, very humble structure that is concrete bearing wall structure. It's exposed on the outside. This texture was created by a board form, just boards that were pulled off, and then some of the fins broke. Some of the concrete fins that were left were broken off. These are a few examples of the texture studies that we did for that project. So, testing everything out from just a 1970s style shag carpet to perforated metal panels, just to see, what those kind of revealed. And then here are the boards that we used to form that texture at the museum. So really simple but beautiful. And then this is the U.S. Embassy we did in Mozambique that uses concrete in a different way. This is precast, also it's ultra-high performance concrete, which I'm still not sure if it's actually concrete. Maybe somebody can tell me that it is. They won't share the ingredients of whatever this product is, but you can do incredible things with it. These were all made in Turkey and shipped to Africa and hung on the building. It provides both blast performance for the building and also sun shading. It's also, this is right on the coast, and there was some concern about using precast concrete on the coast because any of the embeds or any reinforcing that was in there was susceptible to corrosion, but because of the density of UHPC, we were confident that it was going to hold up. Guess we'll see. So further development, after we chose the concrete and kind of moved on from there, our structural engineers got busy. Basically, when the cost to the steel structure was analyzed, I think Nigel will back me up on this, that basically there was nobody could even imagine how a steel structure could accomplish those spans. There were some ideas about a steel box beam, but the complexity of bending that steel to the radii that we needed, the coordination, the weight of it, what that finish would look like. Concrete really, I think when all the factors were weighed, became the obvious material of choice. So, from these earlier designs, we're basically showing these intersecting rings that they're basically that form arches. So, on this outer ring, there are 3 separate rings that are intersecting to create spans that were manageable. But you can see here, all the rings are basically the same depth, and from that, so these drawings are showing the sort of transformation of how from that original idea of these intersecting arches and how they start to align with the different program. So here's the entry of the building. These are unrolled, so it's like if you were to cut the ring, flatten it out, we are looking at how the different program aligned with the intersecting arches. And then we also had the slope of the ramp rising up to one side of the building was a 1-story, and the other side, there was a 2-story side to the building. So this is showing how that arch is inflected when you incorporate those differences in elevations. And then this is taking that same diagram from above and shifting the arches around so that they align better with the different program elements. And this is what you get when you incorporate all those things with actual structural dimension depths, beam depths that we needed. And so once that started, materializing, we started modeling to more accurately this building. And these models were then used, given to the contractor to start thinking about how this could be built, how we're going to lay out the windows system. So these are the earliest BIM models that we started sharing with the team. And then these are diagrams showing early structural analysis. And then this is kind of a cool drawing. We actually have a panorama. It's hard to see, but this is a panorama view, photograph of the city from the site, and then overlay the final design to show the client and remind ourselves what the views would be from inside the building. And so this is the outer ring, the middle ring, and the center ring. And then testing this again with physical models is important to us. I don't know what it is, but we just don't trust computer models yet completely. So we always build these physical models, and then test it again, put back into the computer, test it on the site, test it with the different slopes, the way the site is going to be landscaped and graded, and then these are actually renderings of the final design as we went into CDs. So one of the benefits of having Turner, and this is a picture of Nigel. Looks a lot younger here, but yeah, Turner helped us a lot with some of the material decisions, and also the question of how to texture the building was a heated one at times. We really wanted to board form the surface, and well, long story short, Nigel really didn't want to board form the surface. There were definitely going to be some challenges to it, to already a really complex structure that we by this time knew would be self-consolidating concrete. So really fluid. It was going to be pumped, so the forms had to be sealed. So there were going to be these huge pressures inside the formwork. Nigel's going to get into some of those details, but we lost the battle to have board form concrete for all those reasons, including cost and schedule. So, but this is a picture of an as cast surface with an initial stab at a mineral sealer. This is a Kime product. I think there are others out there. To just whitewash it, to kind of, hide some of we didn't want it to be too busy, but also we knew going in, and especially after doing these mock-ups, that there was going to be, it's going to be hard to control the color of the concrete. Mainly because the formwork wasn't going to be able to be pulled off at the same time, after the same number of days, and we all know that has a big impact on color. So we started looking at Kime as a way to not hide the material quality of concrete, but at least even it out so the building was more monolithic. And so we started, as soon as we could, started testing Kime in different levels of transparency. So these are just the proportions of, I can't remember all the details to it, but anyway, you can see how it incrementally steps down to more transparency to the right. Can't remember exactly where we ended up, but we picked this. This was an area of the building that was either in a mechanical room or behind a wall. But we did a bunch of patching, did a bunch of, tried to represent what, anywhere, what the condition could be, and tested this Kime on it. And we kind of put it to bed at this point, and had to wait until the building was done before we could actually start applying it. But another thing that I think Nigel might speak to again was it was very difficult to dimension anything on this building. And so we ended up using our computer programs, models to geolocate points. So that was used to locate mullions, points of the intersecting arches, really anything, including the defining what the curve of the formwork would be for when we were going to pour this thing. So each one of these is a XY coordinate, and then they shot a piece of rebar in the ground at each one of those points and used that to pin press the formwork up against. Maybe I'm simplifying that, Nigel, but that's basically how we got away with not dimensioning the drawings. So I just wanted to these are going to be really hard to read. They always are. They're washed out. But, one of the unique things about this building is concrete is being used as a facade. It is the primary structure. It's a bearing wall, essentially. But it's also outside the building and exposed to all the elements, temperature swings. And one of the biggest challenges is managing the thermal stresses that the facade goes through, from both a annual cycle, but even a daily cycle. So anything connecting to that structure, we knew was going to have to be an expansion joint. It would have to accommodate some level of movement. We're also dealing with a structure that has spans more similar to bridges. Okay. And, longer spans mean bigger deflections. So that was another challenge that we were going to have to face. Also, thermal bridging. When you have an exterior structure and an envelope in between that and all the beams connecting to it, there's a thermal bridge there that has to be dealt with as well. Just real quick on deflection. We spent a lot of time making sure we're going to be anticipating the deflections. I think we thought that we were going to see up to between 4 and 5 inches of total deflection based on live load, dead load, creep, cracking. I think that we designed to accommodate this 4 to 5 inches in some places, but I don't think it actually ever got to there. So I think, which is a testament to how conservative our structural engineer was, and also to the fine construction work that was done. I'm going to start clicking through a little faster here. So these are just some detailed drawings showing, where this thermal break was happened. So beams connecting to the embed plates. We use thermal break material at each one of those knife plates. So beams are connecting to these embeds, and then the entire slab had to be connected to the diaphragm of the slab had to be connected back to the structural ring. And a little late in the game, our structural engineer realized that because of thermal expansion, this thing was going to be basically cyclically breathing in and out because of its geometry. And so we had to devise a spring plate connection that allowed the roof slab, to move independently of the ring. So here's a detail of that spring plate. You can see it's embedded, so this metal plate bends as the rings expand outward. This whole system can accommodate that movement. I think it was up to 2 inches. And then the window system as well, and how it connected, need to accommodate both the vertical and lateral movements. You can see the spring plates that go all the way around the entire upper ring. This is just another shot of the window system going in and the connection that was needed there. So I'm just going to go through real quick. I'm running out of time, but these are just the final floor plans. More or less the final roof plan, site design was what we started with back in concept. We have a stair. You start your ascension path here. This is the parade route. It's on axis with the entry. And then here's the path up to the sanctuary, the Memorial Grove over here to the north. There was a loading dock on the west side. This is all mechanical space here. We had admin offices down below with their own view outside, and this is the only spot in the basement where you can actually see out. Chiller room, electrical, and then a lot of admin and curatorial space down here. We also had a student entry where busloads of kids could be dropped off, and cubbies for dropping their packs off. There's a multi-purpose room down here, and also restrooms. And then also down below is a space we call the Cyclorama, which you can down once you from above you can come down. This is where the rotating exhibits were displayed in the center. And this is the main floor, so the main entry, exhibit spaces that sort of weave around this spiral and end in this room where there are recorded messages from different people and different conflicts. And you can look down into a double height space into that temporary exhibit below. And then at the top level is a sanctuary lobby where you can both look down onto the main entry and then access the roof from inside the building. This is the sanctuary space here. Here's a couple sections showing the double height space in the center, the great hall, and exhibit space, so you can see the diversity of spaces that we have, even just in the diversity. It starts with these big, grand high ceilings, and also pinches down to much more intimate exhibit space as you move around the building. So just a little primer on some of the things Nigel will be talking about, but as amazing as Baker was in their construction, we did run into some issues that need to be patched, and like I said, we worked through that with our KIME application. I just loved visiting the site and watching this thing come together. It was like visiting an ancient ruin. Here's one of the guys patching, grinding concrete. Really didn't have to do a whole lot, at least not from my eyes. So this is that first application of the KIME. Made sure we had the proportions right, level of transparency, and there's the finished product. So just that right balance, I think, of honesty in how you can see the joints. Turner and Baker did their best to align joints, so at least had a sort of calm pattern on the facade, and it just pretty incredible how it turned out. And here's the building in action with the green roof, some event going on, the roof. This is a shot of that processional. I think this is probably the first one that they did. The glass at the sanctuary has these. These are the colors represent tours of duty flags. So if you go on a mission, you're presented with a badge with these colors, and so this represents hundreds of different tours of duty. Here's a shot. I thought this was amazing at night, showing all the paths illuminated. That one I found online. And then here are these words that I started with: honor, connect, inspire, educate. I think COVID kind of put a little bit of damper on the opening of this project, but I think hopefully things are going to start picking back up, and veterans and their families and anyone can go visit this museum. It's a really amazing exhibit if you get the chance. These are shots from the opening. And that's it. So, do you have any questions?